if you haven't been to these, well, maybe just before I start, little tech mishap earlier. So just before I start, I was going to do an acknowledgement of country. I may just hold on that, and Andrew Colangelo from Mirvac, Development Director at Mirvac, will be coming up and presenting essentially what Harbourside is in a few minutes, and he's going to take us through an acknowledgement of country that has really been worked through specific for this project. I thought that was pretty special and important, so let's leave that to the side for now. If you haven't been to these events before, welcome for your first time. To give you a high-level cap of what will be happening tonight, I'll just run through some of the boring stuff at the beginning before we get into the main show. So in a few minutes, I'm going to hand across to Andrew Colangelo. Andrew's going to take us through essentially what Harbourside is. So some of the history of Harbourside, this is a very small snapshot, otherwise we could be here for quite a while. Where Harbourside is, so no doubt everyone has fond memories of Harbourside and Sea World and all those great things in Darling Harbour, which is me. But where it is, sort of what the competition focused on, what was important to Mirvac, and then really that vision and the aspirations Mirvac has for the project now going forward. So I won't steal Andrew's thunder, and he'll do it a lot more eloquently than me. Then we're going to get into the really important stuff. Have the architects, the competitors from the competition, each come up and give a bit of an overview of how they approached the design competition and what their design proposal was for the competition. Then we're going to finish off with a panel discussion. So sort of two things to cover off before I get into the sort of administration is, first off on housekeeping. If there's an emergency, there's going to be alerts, so follow the alerts, or Andrew, I guess he said to me before. Washrooms are around the corner that way, and then down the corridor if you need them. In terms of drinks and a little bit of food at the back, as I say, I'll talk for another like 2 minutes or so. Take this opportunity now to get a drink before the main show starts. You can move around and everything, get comfortable before we get into the really important stuff. The second thing is, for the panel discussion, I've got a few pre-prepared questions. This is a very well-oiled, well-organised event by Colby. I haven't really done what I was meant to do and prepare lots of really good questions, so I've got a handful. Can we please get questions from the crowd? I think that's always best, it's the most engaging. So anything that does come up, well, there's burning questions you wanted to ask your colleagues, please take the opportunity now. Either throw up a hand at the end, I'll bring you a mic, or you can just text me if you really don't want to ask it. All right, I'll ask it for you. So just a little bit on the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. It's a mouthful. CTBUH is a non-profit organisation, chapters all across the world, a few committees across Australia. As I say, I'm here on behalf of the Sydney, the New South Wales committee. We hold these events 3 to 4 times a year. Really, CTBUH is a non-profit member organisation, really about the advocacy of tall buildings and the spaces between. So really the spaces that we work within and focus on and love as well, right? So if you're not a member, I'll put up a slide in a second where you can become a member, QR code and whatnot. I encourage you to do that. Clicker. One thing to highlight is that the CTBUH conference is held annually. This year it's in October in Toronto. Last year it was in Paris and London, and the year before that Singapore, so Toronto obviously better than all of those places. Someone who's lived there for a few years, wonderful city, great place to go and visit. Really encourage everyone to go and do that. Obviously start planning for it now. If anyone wants to sponsor a director of a small startup planning consultancy, obviously the offer's there. But look, the conferences, I think they're really great. I had the benefit of going to Singapore a few years ago, just to hear from different people all over the world, how they're approaching the same challenges that we are. It's pretty special to hear and appreciate that. So I know everyone's going to want to scan that QR code, but maybe we'll put up at the end again. Look, not to take up too much more time, just before I hand across to Andrew, I do just want to really re-emphasise and reiterate, Mirvac is a sponsor this evening. Obviously this event doesn't happen without them. This wonderful space that we're in, beautiful wine and cheese and whatnot that we're enjoying tonight. So as I say, fill up your glass because it's on Mirvac. Really appreciate what they're doing, and the commitment of a major sponsorship really just make sure that we can continue to do these events, and I think it's probably the cheapest ticket in town, so it's pretty good. Andrew over here. I had this whole thing prepared for Andrew and his black t-shirt and whatnot, touching on his design side, but he's gone with his developer look this evening. But look, Andrew, I'm going to hand it across to you.
Thanks, Brendan. And please enjoy the hospitality. It's probably not often that you get the generosity of the developer sort of amongst the architects. So, drink up. My name is Andrew Colangelo. I'm the project director on the Harbourside project, part of the development team. I'm representing sort of Mirvac here tonight. So firstly, just welcome. We are incredibly excited to have you all here, and we're incredibly excited to sort of share the design propositions for the Harbourside competition. I'd like to sort of begin with an acknowledgement of country, and we acknowledge the Gadigal people and the ancestors of coastal Sydney clans, their elders both past and present, and the people who still love on country and maintain their cultural connections to country. We acknowledge the continuing cultural practices of the coastal Sydney clans, and that cultural knowledge is obtained within community and family. And we talk about and acknowledge sort of country in a very sort of meaningful way sort of on this project. And I think that there is a certain theme which I'll sort of talk about that was important to us even sort of at the conception of the competition design brief, and that was making sort of meaningful connections and contributions to Indigenous sort of communities. The Harbourside project is an incredible privilege for Mirvac. It's in a privileged location. It's a privileged sort of project in terms of what it's going to sort of offer back to the broader sort of rejuvenation sort of the Darling Harbour sort of precinct. And we are very much sort of committed at Mirvac to create a very sort of special place. And I hope that you'll see sort of our commitment through the competition sort of process, and also as it sort of culminates with the winning scheme. The central idea behind the project at the very inception of our thinking, and that was really about returning to Tumbalong where all are welcome. And Tumbalong is the traditional name, albeit sort of still contested name of the area of Darling Harbour. And Tumbalong, for those who don't know, in Gadigal means a place where seafood is found. And so what we learnt at the very sort of beginning of our journey sort of on this project was that this has always been an incredibly important place, not only to the Gadigal people, but also the Sydney clans who not only sort of lived on country, but they exchanged, they worked, and they played sort of in this place. So Tumbalong is an incredibly sort of important sort of place for millennia, and we really sort of took the central sort of tenet of the idea about sort of where all is welcome. From that underpins that central idea is really sort of our place commitments. And our place commitments is a project which is people-centric. It has precinct experiences, and we can't achieve any of those two things unless that we have great partner engagements. And what we mean by people-centric, and that is that this is probably one of the most public projects that Mirvac has delivered. There are 30 million people that visit the eastern and the western shores of Tumbalong, Darling Harbour every year. And so it's a place where we need to sort of centre people in all of our sort of thinking. And whether that's the residents, whether that's office workers, whether that is the visitors and the patrons to the retail throughout sort of the project, it really sort of is critical. The precinct experience, and again, sort of this was sort of within sort of the original competition brief. And the theme of that is that we know that this precinct is known for the big experiences, the fireworks and the boat shows and the live sites for the World Cup. But what we have learnt through this journey is that the community and the neighbourhoods that want fine grain experiences. And so that is a key element sort of the competition brief, and as it sort of has carried through to its developed design. So this project has been a very long sort of journey for Mirvac. So the old Harbourside shopping centre, I'm sure sort of everyone bought a pair of Ugg boots and got some chocolate fudge at some point sort of in their life. It was built in 1988 as part of the rejuvenation of the precinct, and it was a gift back to the people of New South Wales as part of the bicentennial celebrations. The reference scheme was drawn up by Richard Francis Jones and his team, obviously FJC Studio now, and that really sort of cemented some key ideas. It was a long, torturous journey. I'm sure sort of Richard and Sean, who sort of worked on the project sort of tirelessly, would testify sort of that the tower probably moved about sort of 15 times due to sort of community sort of consultation. But then all of that sort of culminated through a USP process with New South Wales government, and that really sort of launched us into a competition brief which we formulated, not only in consultation with the City of Sydney, but also the Government Architect's Office, and then that really sort of launched the competition, which then sort of culminated in the competition sort of propositions being sort of presented in November and December of 2021. So it's been a long journey. We are incredibly proud of the architects and their design partners that they brought into the competition scheme. So FJMT and SHOP, Ingenhoven and Architectur, Woods Bagot, 3XN and PTW, Snohetta and Hassell, they all brought amazing sort of design partners, and I know through experience that the jury found it very difficult to come to a conclusion. I think what was incredibly sort of encouraging and exciting and a bit of a sort of a new world, and that was that as much as we love architects, they actually brought landscape designers as fundamental sort of design partners. So we saw each of the 6 schemes as landscape propositions, and hopefully you'll see those propositions, or you'll understand sort of those propositions sort of shortly. But also, all of the architects brought Indigenous partners, which was a really sort of fundamental sort of requirement and criteria of the competition brief. And we truly believe that that has created sort of a difference in the propositions of the schemes, but also a real sort of difference in the successful scheme that sort of moved forward. The criteria of the competition brief was really sort of underpinned by Mirvac's commitment about reimagine urban life and our commitment to creating great places for people. We thought that it was really important to create a place for people, celebrating the harbour and connecting to place and country. And it's that country connection which was a really sort of ambitious part of our exploration. All of the participants that we selected demonstrated sort of one common element, and that is that they all demonstrated not only design excellence, but they all demonstrated that there was a specific sort of proposition for site. So we went through a very long, and I remember sort of I was sort of quite close to the selection, to the process of the architects to get to the shortlist. And so all of the architects that sort of participated in the competition had an incredibly sort of strong ethos around being site specific and specific to context. So in conclusion, Mirvac is incredibly proud. We're incredibly proud of the 6 propositions that were sort of put forward. We're incredibly proud of the winning scheme produced by Snohetta and Hassell, who work closely with Ingenhoven. We're incredibly sort of proud of all of the amazing sort of propositions that were sort of put forward, and also the really sort of strong and amazing sort of landscape and place propositions that were all sort of put forward. And we're also incredibly proud about how all of the architects and all of their design teams came to the competition, partnering with Indigenous partners to create a deeper connection to country. And finally, we are incredibly proud as Mirvac to continue our support of the Tall Building Council as gold members through 2025. So on that point, I'd just like to once again sort of welcome everyone to this evening. We're amazed with the turnout. We're incredibly sort of proud of this competition, and we hope you enjoy the competition schemes as much as we enjoyed assessing them back in 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. That was amazing. He's still got that little bit of architect in him, only like a minute or two later. So look, we're going to go through, I say that in the context of what I'm about to say, 6 presentations, 5 in person, 1 on screen. We're going to start off with a bang with Jana, who I'm going to invite up in 1 second. Just to give everyone in the audience an understanding, the presenters will speak for 6 minutes, just 6 minutes, right? And then, as I say, we'll get everyone back up to have a bit of a panel discussion. So again, think of questions and through. Jana, do you want to come present to start?
Thank you, Brendan. Let's see what it's fantastic. My name is Jana from Scrum. I'm Professor in Team Architectures and Ingenhoven. At the very start of the project, we spent considerable amount of time looking at the site.
Excuse me, speak closer to the microphone. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, fantastic. Great. So at the start of the project, we spent considerable amount of time looking at the pre-colonial history of the site. We looked at the landscape, the landform, and the relationship of the site to the First Nations clans. Interestingly, it was a place of meeting where various clans came together in its contemporary setting. We think this is a place of great connection, facilitating various movements across the site. So the proposed metro station will increase the amount of foot traffic across the bridge. It will also have a desired line across the side going towards the side of the harbour. And on top of that, you get a two-cycle link that will split the building into 2. And we've used this network of design lines and view corridors and pedestrian connections to carve and shape and form the podium. And this resulted in series of interlocking floor plates that slipped in and out, and it was a really good device to actually break down the mass of the massive podium. So at the ground level, there's whole series of retail that open out the waterfront promenade with the lobbies of the residential buildings and the commercial building type of down drive. So the ground plane has got a whole lot of F&B activities, a stage in the foreground, a campshed, even a stair that took people up to it. Guardian Square is the prime public space in the proposal. It engaged the Piedmont Bridge to the west and flowed down gradually towards the immense stair. It also linked this view of the Guardian Square with the whole lot of F&B flanking the western side. Skip past that. So the Guardian Square is a prime public space. It's gently sloped towards the even stairs to the south, and it linked in with the Bagot Street connection and the through side connection through it. The Bagot Street connection is dominated by quite a generous landscape stair itself. It's quite wide, and it's almost like a people stair, just people from the high position to brought them back to the water's edge. So we have the through side connection. It's almost like a third space. You're not going to be part of the Guardian Square or the waterfront promenade. You could hang out here. It also had connection back to the lobbies of the various two entities of the commercial and the apartment, with a large opening to the top that brought a lot of daylight. And the podium rooftops were landscaped with wetlands. And when you look from above, down from above, it had looked like a giant block painting. It's back on the ground floor looking towards north, and here we see the podium floors slipping in and out, hovering above the retail. There's a view from the other side of the harbour. The podium flows seamlessly into the tower. The podium facade is very much about being anti-CBD typology. We want to kind of feel like a landform and solid sills create a really good elegant horizontal articulation. View from inside out, and the tower itself. That we were looking for a elegant and a kind of uniform tower, and we settled on a symmetrical floor plan with wraparound balconies and soft edges on the sides, and the edges of the balconies projected out by 600 mm to cater for PV cells. And given the prime real estate is the north, we passed the port to the south, and as we went up, the lifts dropped and the area of the apartments increased. And the top of it had a roof garden and a pool. And I'll conclude the presentations with some of the renders that we did. With a through cycle coming down. Would be from the south to north, and from the bridge. I've seen that bridge before, and the last image of the tower shimmering in the skyline.
Thanks, Shona. Thank you for that. Next up, we have Fred Ivana, who's speaking as well, Simon and Adrian. I know, so we have a few presenters here I don't know if you guys want to come up to stage together, hang back. Also, if you want, do you want to use a handheld mic as well? Yep, just speaking to the side.
Hello all. I like the discussion about architect wearing black. I wore blue tonight because we're a developer's office. I'll just I think you know the team. Everyone knows each other in this setting. I've been here 7 years now, and I know quite a few of you. But Simon's going to start off, followed by Adrian, and then we'll get into some of the architecture with myself and Alana. Simon.
Thanks, Fred. And it's great to be here. How do I make the thing move? There we go. Okay. Look, what's this project all about? This is a very, very substantial project. It occupies a large footprint and it's in a very disjointed environment. So it has a real responsibility to do what it can to reconnect this environment. Darling Harbour's always suffered from sort of a fractured urban structure. This project has the ability to really help reinforce that structure. So it's not just fractured in terms of the spatial movement, it's fractured in terms of the aesthetic, the different identity of each of the buildings, the experience of being there. The irony is that its original structure was very much about the connection between the land and the water. We've talked about the significance of the Indigenous use of the site. The idea of the water and the land interacting is absolutely fundamental to the proper response to this project. So the challenge, though, that the history of the site was to depersonalise the edge of the water, first through using the site's quarry, and then secondarily through using the edge of the ground as an industrial site, largely to move goods. So it became a site that was no longer for people. But we're now in a situation where this site has a very large footprint, has the potential to try to reconnect, and so that's the sort of the starting point for the design process. And of course there's this great aspiration to contribute to the activity and the vibrancy of Darling Harbour. So in every regard this is about trying to put the pieces back together again. So there's the connection between the land and the water. There's a connection around the bay to reinforce the bay. There's a connection back in time to the Indigenous use of the site. So it has this significant challenge in so many different dimensions to reinforce and bring all these layers back together. That's what this diagram's about, these different things that have happened. The site's been sort of damaged so much over time that it is such a significant challenge to try to knit it together. And one of the fundamental problems with the site has been this strange service road that goes around the west of the site that creates a moat between the land and the water's edge. And that's not really fixable, but again, in concept, that was something that was really important in our response to the project. So the idea of bringing together Indigenous history, the connection to water, and the landscape is underpinning the concept of this project. And I might hand at this point to my colleague Adrian.
Thanks, Simon. So I think the idea that we explored was, can the site work for the community beyond its boundaries? So what we investigated in terms of looking at the open space connections was that the Pyrmont side of the city is actually poorly provided in terms of accessible open space. So there's an opportunity here to reach beyond the site itself and to make a public gesture and a provision for a set of parks and open spaces that really knit and connect the site to the city. So importantly, one of the big kind of urban framework gestures is quite simple, and that is that we already have a well-established ground level waterfront promenade connection, but by stitching the Coxall Bay project across Pyrmont Bridge and on top of the roof of the project, we're able to provide an upper level connection. So it complements the ground level sort of pedestrian connection to Darling Walk. So 2 levels that you could experience Darling Harbour from as an urban gesture. So the concept of the floating gardens was really a response between architecture and landscape architecture to create a podium that was cut into a series of pieces. Now the pieces were cut to allow light and to allow air into the podium to break the bulk and to create these really interesting moments that stitch the site back to the east and west. And interestingly enough, these levels as they change created this idea of floating gardens. So it was a very simple concept. And then what we wanted to do was to knit the floating gardens so that one could walk from pedestrian level or a promenade all the way up over the roof and down the other side to make this incredible journey that was stitched into the site. And then the park itself then was a series of floating gardens that are arranged to complement the ground level, if you like. Fred.
Thanks, Adrian. Actually, Adrian, this is you again. Adrian took the concept discussion, but he said it better than I would have. So I think you're up again, Adrian.
Okay, so the idea of the hill in Gadigal language is bulga. So it's a very simple idea to mimic the hill. And of course the gibber of the sandstone that's been cut over time as industrialisation and wars took over. So it was sliced and diced, and what we wanted to do is recreate this bulga, the hill, using the gibber of country, and then to stitch this wonderful journey that navigates all of the kind of different floating garden levels. And then a very simple idea, if we all know about the 4 seasons in European culture, but the Aboriginal 6 seasons was then the idea that kind of underpinned the floating gardens. And they moved from summer, the northern part, which is receiving the most sun, all the way through autumn, winter and spring, and then picking up those gardens as they move across the roof. So what we're able to do is to create this wonderfully connected, publicly accessible set of bulga park and floating gardens that stitch the whole site together. And importantly, were publicly accessible. So residents could still use facilities around the base of the tower, but there was a publicly accessible set of floating gardens that make a contribution to the city into Piedmont and beyond. So it's a very public and very wonderful kind of set of propositions for the existing neighbourhood. Fred.
Adrian said it all, so I'm just going to go through this very quickly. I think we have 30 seconds. But well done, Adrian. So as Adrian mentioned, we wanted to make it publicly accessible. We felt there was a dearth of green space in the area. Of course, Cockle Bay is being developed by our good friends at Henning Lawson, and there's a green space. We're kind of echoing that urban landscape in terms of accessible roof. It was really important for us to break the scale of the overall building by having these indentations, which Adrian so eloquently said, allow daylight deep into what would be the office space. And we broke the facade into essentially 3 or 4 horizontal datums, which start to talk about the striation of the site that have a vertical orientation to handle the low east and western sun. These indentations actually separate the office into kind of manageable 1,000 to 1,200 square meter floor plates. Through site link, as discussed previously, it was really important to make the site quite permeable. Taking that public domain in and through rather than just water facing. All the lobby spaces were towards the west to help activate that edge. Access to the rooftop garden from the north and south was actually quite important to announce that it's actually a public space, and then keeping that ground plane retail activation quite simple. So I'm going to flip through these images. We all like looking at images. And again, those indentations actually help us create these manageable office space to create a variety of potential anchor tenants. The indentations also help with daylight to bring daylight deeper into this deep floor plate. And then of course, the options to have a loggia or an operable facade for covered outdoor terraces. 3X in, we always care about flow and program and how those two things mix. So the main entry arrival moment became very important, which was accessible from Guardian Square at that arrival moment where you're introduced to this green space and then taken out of that typical public realm.
So I think we're well and truly out of time, so just very quickly, extrusion. We started with the extrusion of the residential tower, moved the core towards the south, maximising the amount of light coming to each of those spaces. Inherently in the apartment mix, we had a bit of a play articulated within the facade. Ooh, sorry. We extended those floor plates 1.5 metres to try and maximise the available outdoor space. It's such a beautiful setting. Articulated that with this waveform, sort of nodding to the peals of the podium, but also, again, the setting that it's sitting with. It sort of articulates each one of those apartment blocks, but it's also able to work within any apartment mix. So it's just creating that sort of play. We pulled up the balustrade, that allowed us to block the westerly winds and sun, as well as maximise views out to the harbour. And that's how it plays out along the facade. So again, allowing for privacy screens in between apartment units, maximising the views out, and then a deeper recess in your primary living space. Oh, okay. And that's it. Thank you.
As Andrew mentioned, probably a bit of a therapy session, as Richard and Sean and the team spent a very long time on the project and then the competition. So I'd like to invite Richard up to present his design concept for Harbourside.
Thank you. So here's our design team. McGregor, Shannon Foster, Holly, Hannah and Mel, and Martha. So in thinking about this site and in casting our minds back to what it was before settlement, we realised that there is the original shoreline and perhaps the opportunity to interpret that edge and understand the reclamation of land, and in some ways create a experience of recollection. And so we worked quite closely with Shannon and Martha on this idea, and you can see how that drops down into the shore and creates that sense of an edge and a strong landscaped presence. And part of that, of course, is the presence of the Port Jackson fig, the dominant tree. And this little section shows how that landscape flows down and then is actually interpreted in this building that sits at that important junction, which you can see there. So it was a building conceived that we worked on quite closely with Shannon that could be free up the ground, but within it, and there's a lot of retail in this project, but there could be First Nations focused exhibition, retail, food, design and produce. But also in thinking about areas of intense waterfront redevelopment and Darling Harbour, there was a step back to think about how we structure the urban form at our waterfront. This, of course, you recognise a photograph of Circular Quay, really successful part of the quay and a very fine grain that exists at Circular Quay. So we were really interested to see whether it's possible to find a fine grain in this urban form. To actually bring these different geometries through into public spaces that already exist, and to give a sense of the Piedmont grain coming through to the shore. So then the buildings to the west of that line, we conceived of as a kind of escarpment, that those podium buildings could be reinterpretation of the sandstone escarpment. So there, that was sketches from cutaway and how they actually also address Harbourside Drive, which becomes quite an important rider for it. So there we are, looking through to the waterfront. And the tower then was conceived as something quite separate that could be conceptually floating above this platform. And it's got a lot of really well designed apartments in it. Very rational core. And then when it came to the balance of the buildings that are less integrated in the tower, we thought that this should be the work of other architects that will make a city like this, not just by ourselves, but with other designers. So we got in contact with some friends of ours, and each of them worked with us to design these buildings, which I just, so that's looking down, you can see that grain coming through, the integration of the landscape towards the north, and then a series of pavilion-like buildings that create that address and that presence on the major public space. So the first of those was designed by Polly Hudson, who's in the back there. And it's a very beautiful building sitting at that really decisive corner as you come around and you head north. But it's a way of creating buildings which have a fine scale to them, a different character, and perhaps a warmer, more human character. Just another view of Polly's building. And then, oops, I'll just be quick. This is Hannah's building here. So it follows this arc that just brings you round towards the shore. So very decisive buildings, sort of brings you round, slightly bigger scale. Continuous facade. A lot of attention to sun shading and layering amongst all of these designers. And a beautiful building to be looking out at the waterfront. And then finally, Mel's building, so I actually got someone from Melbourne up. And that's a very decisive location between those two laneways. And this is a really lovely building, nice relationship between these buildings. Quite playful, use of really warm screen materials to deal with the low angle sun, and a really fine grain to the waterfront. So then that gave us a plan a little bit like that. So it's kind of thought about it as a piece of the city that sits at the shore with a series of laneways, streets, and parklands and waterfront promenade, of course. Also worked, you can get into the building and get up through the lobbies, and this then shows you what that kind of hybrid, rich, and quite playful character is like. These buildings, we work together all together on this one, so there's some sense of seeing together, but each one has a different instrument to play. And then looking across, oh, you can't really see that because of those chairs. But anyway, that's it. Down there, nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Next up, we have Andrea and Amanda.
Well, this is the first time that actually Shaw participates on an event like this, and it was very interesting for us because most of the design competition we kind of needed to do it in New York. We're completely in lockdown. It was nice for us to reflect on what happened then, the constraints that we had on doing this fantastic competition, and the pleasure that we had doing that too, because it involves quite a lot of public realm and the chance of us really designing the future of a city more so than just the future of a building. Some of you may know Shop is based in New York, but we have been in Australia for quite a long time, more than 10 years. We started with the Collins Arch project in Melbourne. Right around the time that we did this competition, we were just doing competitions in a row in Australia. I don't quite know why. We did a Plassen, we did a Pitt Street, and then we were involved on this one later on. That is one of the reasons why we teamed up with Field Operations, and I do want to speak about that partnership. They were absolutely our amazing collaborators on this competition, and they have done with us the Seaport and the Domino precincts in New York, which are, for who have been in New York recently, they are completed. These are the most successful projects in the city. They're very aware also of our concept and what's important for us while starting these projects. We always go and look at what the original site, the characteristics of the sites are, and try to bring those great qualities into these projects. In the case of Seaport, kind of bringing that nature, the water edges, and the connectivity of the people on the site back to the people in New York. Same thing with the Domino. We kind of transformed that industrial area that was there before and tried to mimic the character of the site, creating these layers that walk you from land to water and really give the identity of the site. So this was, great lessons learned and principles that we wanted to bring into the Harbourside competition, kind of drive our vision for this project. And we started to also investigate did a great analysis of what the site was. We were very inspired by the ecosystems that were there on site, even the topographies of the coast, the skills that were played there. And our inspiration was to try to integrate that kind of quality into, especially in the podium, in this very pedestrian experience that you get in the site. We started to kind of, from one of the biggest opportunities that we found on the site, this kind of very continuous floor plate that was ideal for the offices above, for the connectivity and the adaptability that a lot of tenants from one tenant or multi-tenants really like to have on their workplace. And we started first from, sorry, this is clicking too fast, I apologize. Started first from curving out that floor plate, creating what we call the inlets. In other words, are these kind of cove topologies that helped us to break down the scale, create a more human-friendly experience at the ground, maximize the retail, and obviously bring great daylight and air for the offices above. We then calibrated the massing in order to maximize the area according to the approved envelope. And after that, we entered kind of iteration on this party. We do that very often at shop. We kind of do options or variations with our internal digital tools in order to understand what would be the optimal floor plate, especially for the offices. So the result of that was understanding that if we were to set back some of these floor plates in one of the sides, we could actually achieve a really optimal depth per each floor. In other words, the solar orientation within the office would be more optimal and created a really good quality for these offices, these kind of edge of outdoor spaces that we further kind of kernelated in order to maximize the views out from those pockets. And the result was really this fantastic outdoor space, kind of calibrated in terms of depth for 1 to 2 teams that could come outside on that big office space and have a way of being next to nature and connect to each other within that floor. The result, as you can see, was a very connected floor with a central spine of circulation. These would be an opportunity for one tenant, for example, to be in the entire floor, or very easily could subdivide these floors and not lose any of the qualities of the outdoors that we have programmed around those inlets. Also from those inlets, another kind of characteristic or good thing about them is that while you were in the office and you're going outside just for a break or to have a meeting there, you could also feel that great experience on the ground because you were connected visually with that. We tried to enhance further the mobility through the site, so we created this campus loop that would give you access then to our main connections, the one to Piermont, to the water, and also to the bridge. throughout the entire campus. And the result is really like this kind of very human scale design that gives you a great variety of areas throughout this amazing boulevard. There's one more image, sorry, the clicker is going too fast. I want to mention too, and it's kind of on behalf of the field operations team, there is a lot of things that in a lot of off-country, off-place, off-Sydney landscape and place and design that was made within this entire public realm, very well curated by that team. They were fantastic partners on this. The top of the podiums were also really great opportunities for us to generate these kind of platforms for community events, for events that happen all year round, very typical from Sydney. The last kind of massing that sort of, the residential massing kind of floats above this very organically shaped podium. We started from kind of manipulating the massing in terms of performance. We wanted to, one, kind of maximize the views out, but also play with this idea of the tapered massing in order to achieve great depth for the small units, kind of at the ends of the massing, and then the large units more at the center. The expression of the building itself is sort of a translation of our concept for the balconies. We wanted to, we're kind of very inspired by the neighborhoods of Piermont, and it happens also in Paddington, kind of these townhouses that have these really nice balconies with screens and very private while they are exposed to the street. And we kind of brought that concept into these high-rise. So instead of being this continuous, all-linked balcony in the entire apartment, we kind of thought about them more as plug-ins that would be connected to the living rooms and connected to the bedrooms, and ultimately bring to the tower this kind of more sculptural, texture on the elevations that really help to break down the scale of this big volume on top of this very activated ground below. I'll close here this presentation. I just want to say that while we were not, the successful team, we really enjoyed to do this competition because we love to do projects where you get to do a lot of public ground. They are, I speak even personally for the project that you just saw on the seaport. It's very rewarding to see how they get activated and how your design really improves the lives of the people in the cities that you live. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. I can't even remember who won. Liz and Matt, you want to come up, present? So there's the last in person, just as Liz and Matt are coming up. Questions, very shortly, all right?
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone, for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Liz Westcuff from Hassell.
Hi, I'm Matt Irvine from Snohetta.
So our response is deeply embedded in country, and we were really fortunate to work with Dinjama through the competition process that really expanded our knowledge of country. And as Andrew beautifully talked about in the introduction, this was and continues to be a really important place for the Indigenous community, and in particular the Gadigal and the Wongal clans. This was a place of celebration, connection, and ultimately it was a shared place, and that was something that we really wanted to reflect in our design response.
Yeah, so for us the knowledge and information shared from Dinjama really fed into our concept and thinking. We had a focus to create a place rather than to instill public ownership and a sense of belonging into the site and for everyone who would visit it. We feel that the idea and the experience of place is felt most strongly through nature, so we wanted to look at what the site once had, be inspired by that landscape, and let it help us reimagine what the building could be. So through our response, we wanted to connect the water and the sky, evoke that memory and idea of a sandstone escarpment and green ridgeline, and importantly, acknowledge Tumbalong as a place where seafood is found, and particularly holding importance for Aboriginal women who are experts of the marine environment through boating, fishing and craft. This for us was really about seeing the place that was once there and celebrating that.
So in terms of massing, there were 6 key moves that underpinned our urban design response and also conceptual response for the design. I'm not going to go through all these moves today, but I did want to pick out just a couple in detail that are really important in our design response. The singular connected landscape urban form really is a driving factor in our design response, as well as the sort of erosion and that connection back to this being a watery place, and as Matt talked about, an important place for women, particularly Indigenous women. We wanted to introduce a porosity to the site, and you can see through the diagram on screen there that we wanted to carve away and create that sort of human scale, but also connection to the Piedmont grain as well. Okay, so in terms of landscape is really embedded in our response. We wanted to create a very rich and diverse experience, so some more intimate spaces, but also spaces for larger events and gatherings. One of my favourite spaces, and there are many in this scheme, is the Guardian Square, or now called the Waterfront Garden, which is a much needed green space right adjacent to Piedmont Bridge. And it's an elevated public park and it overlooks Coxall Bay, and it's inspired by the sort of materials, colour and stories of the Indigenous history.
Looking more closely at the base of the podium, for us it's always been, and we always considered it as a base and not a podium. It's a series of individual pieces, but it's tied together in a unifying composition, much like you'd find in landscape or nature. We're also very inspired by the podium, the sandstone escarpment, the layers, the texture and the tonality. In terms of the planning and focus here on the ground floor, obviously that was very driven by the retail, so it's a very active and flexible layout, so focused on the waterfront. Importantly, we did introduce the idea of permeability and connecting through the site, particularly through to that western edge. On the commercial floor plates, we had an idea to kind of pull together the 25,000 square metres across 4 levels and create a campus-style workplace. One of the key moves that we made was really to move the core to the western perimeter and open up those large floor plates so that it allowed connection to the water and city views from anywhere. This is looking at our level 2. So you can see those large floor plates. You can see the large contiguous floor plate, but also we're kind of showing the clarity and arrival from the north, from Waterfront Garden, and that connection for circulation down the spine of the cores. Also, in the floor plate and the design of the project, there is ability for connection through the floors, through voids. The facade for the base has 2 main systems. We're looking at the primary system, which looked to balance the performance of the facade across the intent and outlook to the site and context, and then more glazed or watery connections through the winter garden. So in the primary facade, we're really looking at layers of banding, fruiting and shading to balance that, and then a more glazed approach with the enhanced operability of winter gardens to break up and define the form.
Okay, so moving on to the tower expression really harks back to the Indigenous stories, and particularly this being an important place for the craft of women and the connection to that marine environment. So we wanted to bring the expression of the fishing net into the tower. And the other move with the tower is that we were keen that it floats between that landform base and the celestial sky as well. In terms of planning, also, oh sorry, a bit sensitive here, also have some beautiful apartments. Similar to many of the other schemes tonight, we had the core positioned on the south, and that liberated the north to some really fantastic high quality apartments that enjoy great views and light. Just going back then to the tower facade expression, as I mentioned, it is this woven net, and a tactility and warmth was really important. But we also wanted to introduce some quite important pragmatic moves. So we have deep horizontals on the north and deep verticals on the east and west that provide that much needed solar protection. But we wanted a consistent expression around the tower. So something that, as I mentioned, had tactility and warmth, but wasn't just a simple glass box. And then lastly, before we move into images, because I know everyone's very keen to see some of the images that support the design proposal, we really wanted to make an emphasis or a point around sustainability, and it isn't just an overlay, it is something that has driven almost every single decision on the project and continues to drive key decisions on the project. And it is really about creating a resilient and regenerative place. So then, just finally, before we finish up, we just wanted to share some of the visuals of the scheme. And as you can see here, I think this is one of my most favourite visuals, because it really shows the strength of that landform base. So it's not just a building, it's a place. It has meaning. It really pulls in the meaning of the history of the place. And then you can see the tower floats quite elegantly above that landform base. And then a view from the waterfront promenade, and you can see here again the tactility and the warmth of the facade, but also the activation along that waterfront edge.
Thanks. And obviously the landscape and the public domain are a major part of our project and scheme. There's 10,000 square metres of public domain delivered as part of the project in the new waterfront promenade, but also this new public park for waterfront gardens. So we wanted to really be a place for residents and visitors alike. This is a view back towards the city, and I think I think we want this to be really a vibrant waterfront development that connected Pyrmont back to the city of Sydney, and we think with the connection of the landscape and Pyrmont Bridge really deliver on that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brendan. Good evening, everyone. Tim Davies from Woods Bagot, and my pleasure to share our competition entry for Harbourside. I've actually relocated from Sydney about a year ago, hence why I can't be there in person. But it's a fantastic project, obviously, to work on. And before I start, just like to acknowledge country and the traditional custodians of this land. Now, our philosophical concept of the project is based on the ebb and flow of country, community, and commerce. The aim is to create a real place of character which supports the exchange of social interactions and is for all people, all demographics, a real connection to country. And we started the process by studying and analysing existing context of Pyrmont, as we've heard, obviously, all the other competitors did. And the urban grain aligned to Pyrmont Bridge and Union Street drove the set out of the northern element of the proposal. And the Pyrmont grid, running from the ancient ridgeline to the harbour, directly informed the rest of the development grain. This grid shift across the block enhanced the waterfront connections. And where these two urban grids intersected, we created specific nodal points that reference natural geological forms. At certain moments, the nodes became meeting places, supporting social interactions, and at other nodes, their skylights bringing daylight into the heart of this kind of huge ground scraper which forms the office kind of precinct. The site itself is built on reclaimed land over a number of stages, and we mapped the original shoreline from historical records to finalise those positions of those nodes as a reference back to the original land prior to the Industrial Revolution. And the shoreline itself determined the materiality of the precinct. So at the lower levels we had the earthy base of the building linking the mud, the sand and harbour, giving way to the lighter tones of the shells on the site, with cuts in the masking of the tower revealed with kind of pearlescent finishes reminiscent of the inside of a shell. And the overall view here, you can see where the ground form really locks into the existing network around the site. And as we just talked about in the Q&A, you know, that shrink-wrapped envelope was obviously quite a strong constraint, but really locking into those existing levels. The experience of the place was equally paramount to our approach. How can we support the users of this new development to create their own stories and history? And this was something that kind of underpinned all of our design thinking and our partners through the project. It comprised of a multi-layered approach inspired by that unique coastal landscape of Sydney, the oyster and cockle beds at its base, rocky cliffs in the middle, and then leading up to kind of sheltered forest on top of the podium. And within the heart of the centre of the project, we created an eddy. That was our kind of nickname for this three-dimensional space that vertically connects from the basement parking to the gardens of the residential tower above. And it really acts as this kind of central attractor, aiding wayfinding, whilst physically and deliberately mixing the different occupants of the retail, the workplace, the residences, along with the kind of casual visitor. So it became this place for everyone to kind of come together in the heart of the scheme. And connecting the landing of Piermore Bridge on the right-hand side of the image to the eddy in the centre is a new generous public ground, Guardian Square, which was a key kind of part of the brief. The square is fully public and has the ability to morph between different modes, from a plateau or perched water to event mode where the usable space can dramatically increase, to art mode where it transforms into an ephemeral installation, shifting with seasonal changes, and its landscape and material palette being deliberately tactile and full of kind of native species. The workplace, again, as you sort of see in some of the other competition entries, you know, different architects have taken different approaches. We went with a kind of ground scraper approach from level 1 to 4 to create these really significant floor plates. You know, the lowest kind of, the largest floor plate on level 1 is over sort of 9,000 square meters of net area. And effectively, we imagine this as a kind of campus on water. You know, a single tenant could take over the entire floor plate, or you could subdivide into kind of smaller tenants. And in the visual, you can see that ground plane being dedicated to a series of retail, restaurants, activating and linking the promenade with the public, and the workplace hovering above. And the concept around the workplace is to create a living, breathing building, where every tenant has access to nature, fresh air, and is mixed mode ready. The floor plates are a simple structural framing system that can be hacked and adapted to suit tenant demands over time, and multiple entries being created to form dedicated lobbies for anchor tenants. The Green Gorge is our sort of nickname for the verdant landscape route, which connects up from the promenade at the south all the way up to the eddy on level 2, and the greenery and planting acting as a kind of natural filter to the workplace behind. Floor plate depths have been tailored to allow natural lighting with a central green spine running the entire length to promote that connection to nature, enhancing physical and mental wellness. And then moving up to the tower itself. And again, it had quite a constrained envelope that we all had to kind of work within. And we deliberately sort of broke it down into a series of kind of smaller elements and blocks by height, orientation, and apartment type to allow everyone to identify with their home. And a key requirement of the brief was actually to protect the solar wind access to the Woodward fountain. And we responded via a dramatic cut into the massing of the tower, which increased the amount of sunlight to the fountain and the public realm, particularly over that kind of lunchtime period. Obviously, much to the delight of the structural engineers with our significant cantilever. And here you kind of see that cantilever and the dynamics of that tower form as you sort of move across the space from the ground floor level. The tower reads as a crystalline form revealed by the shifting tides of the harbour and set above the earth, rock and eroded form of the podium. Glazed ceramic faience is proposed as an interpretation of the shells and the cockles on site. From Dunn Street on the Piermont side, the base of the tower is further eroded to respond to prevailing datums of the neighbouring context. The mid-level wood cut forms a pixelated facade of protected balconies for each resident, protecting from wind and noise. And each balcony was imagined as almost like a terrarium, so that each resident could customise all of their kind of garden settings, creating this kind of piece of nature elevated within the sky. The primary facades of the tower are configured with a variety of components, responding to the function of the room behind, from integrated window seats, clear portals, expansive panoramic windows to capture the views out. And at the crown of the building, we propose an incredible set of penthouses, each with their own kind of character and kind of connection back to nature. And I'll wrap up there on our final sort of slide. But thanks again to everyone involved in the project, all our partners, and to Mirvac.
Thanks, team. And sorry about the pain, but we got there, everyone. I think it's probably a little poetic that the Harbourside project has taken this sort of longer time. But look, I'm not going to keep you longer. Look, thank you again to Mirvac for sponsoring this evening and being sponsored for the If there's only one thing worse than one of me, thank you again to Mirvac for tonight, for the next year going forward. Look, thank you for all of you coming, all the speakers we had tonight, and apologies about the awful tech. But go grab a drink, have a chat with everyone, and I'll see you at the next one.